If you love antiques, the Antiques Roadshow collection will add to your knowledge and enjoyment. Compiled by the Antiques Roadshow team of experts, it helps you identify your finds and judge their value with revealing details about their history. Full of facts about the program, follow the roadshow around the country. Build up your Antiques Roadshow collection, published in 15 weekly parts. Part 1 with a free binder. Out now.
Stand by for the real story about 1990. 12 months that have been called the most exciting year since 1989. The old year is history, and you will be there.
Make a date with Clive James, 11 o'clock New Year's Eve on BBC1.
Starting shortly on BBC2, Mel Brooks' jokey send-up of Star Wars, the oxygen-reducing saga about two evil planetary leaders, co-starring John Candy in Spaceballs. Here on BBC1, songs of praise from Fulwood in Sheffield, after the news with Lynette Lithgow at 6:25.
The headlines this evening. Saddam Hussein has warned America that its interests worldwide could become terrorist targets if there's war. One of his ministers has called Muslims to Baghdad to prepare to mobilize. The Ministry of Defense has confirmed that the secret document stolen from a car did relate to the Gulf crisis. And the small change getting smaller. The old shilling coin is redundant from midnight. Good evening. Iraq has invited 350 leaders from every major Muslim community around the world to a conference on January the 9th. That's 6 days before the United Nations deadline for Iraqi forces to leave Kuwait. Iraq has also warned America that its vital interests worldwide could be targets for terrorist attacks in the event of war.
The conference, which the Minister of Religious Affairs announced, is clearly intended to be the centerpiece of Saddam Hussein's diplomatic effort before the 15th of January deadline. The plan is to mobilize Islamic opinion throughout the world.
أنا قلت حقيقة يعني هو مو احتمال حتما يعني راح تتعرض المقدسات.
And we are aware that one of the first targets of the aggression will be religious places. And therefore we would like to say that it is duty of all Muslims and Christians in the world to raise their voice. And indeed they have raised their voice now, condemning the aggression and calling for peace.
And the minister went on to say, every Muslim will be a missile. Iraq isn't in any sense a fundamentalist Islamic state, but the government here does see religion as a powerful unifying force which will generate pro-Iraqi and anti-American feeling throughout the entire Islamic world. John Simpson, BBC News, Baghdad.
In a New Year's message on Iraqi television, President Saddam Hussein said he's praying for peace, while at the same time he castigated Western powers as evil and aggressive. He singled out President Bush for criticism in a 15-minute speech laden with religious references and overtones. He also mentioned Palestine and other occupied territories in the Middle East, where security and peace lay outside the reach of many people. Iraq has refused Gulf crisis talks with the United States unless the issue of Palestine is included. 11 days before the UN deadline, European foreign ministers will meet for emergency talks. It was Germany's idea, backed up today by Britain, which wants to keep up the pressure on Saddam Hussein. But with no sign of talks between Baghdad and Washington, other EC countries may use next Friday's meeting to press for a new European initiative.
The German foreign minister is the driving force behind the call for an emergency meeting. Hans-Dietrich Genscher says it's imperative to give diplomacy a chance in the search for a peaceful solution to the Gulf crisis. Many other European Community foreign ministers who've been meeting regularly to discuss the Gulf also believe that diplomatic initiatives have to be exhausted before military force is used. Their emergency session this Friday may decide to arrange talks with the Iraqis, even though it might be read as a split in the anti-Saddam Hussein coalition. Britain is cautious, though, arguing Iraq must still realize it has to withdraw from Kuwait.
There is a European position. The Europeans stand together on this, but it must be very clearly understood. And certainly our position will be that it's right for Europe to speak, but Europe must speak in total support of the United Nations position, which all the European countries have subscribed to, of course.
At least half a dozen EC countries are now understood to be in favour of pursuing talks, despite Britain's caution. Germany is clearly among them. Italy, too, has always been keen. The Spanish say all options should be considered, as does Portugal. Ireland may also lend its support. France will probably back the idea, wanting to explore the possibility of an Arab solution to the crisis. As Polish hospital ships left for the Gulf this weekend, they're likely to prove little comfort for President Bush. There'll be no compensation for what could seem like a bad case of cold feet from the Europeans as they prepare to go the extra mile for peace. Jonathan Charles, BBC News, Brussels.
The government says no decision has been taken on whether to send the aircraft carrier HMS Invincible to the Gulf. The American Navy has asked for it to take over enforcement of the UN embargo and release one of their carriers for combat. In Saudi Arabia, regiments from Britain's 4th Armoured Brigade are beginning their deployment in the desert, where chemical and biological weapons are seen as an increasing threat. Martin Bell reports.
Night in the desert, the environment in which the 14th, 20th King's Hussars, newly arrived, expect to go into action. Fighting dirty is one of the drills they practice, carrying the war to an enemy who has just used germ warfare as well as poison gas against them.
We've always known that there was a chemical warfare threat, and where he has the capability to do that, an enemy, generally speaking, has the capability to use biological as well.
To counter the threat, the troops in the desert have warning devices and special equipment to protect them from germs as well as gas. They are training quite literally as if their lives depend on it. Extra vaccinations will be given them before mid-January, and especially among the troops now entering the desert, there is a heightened awareness and realistic assessment of the dangers that they face.
And it is a problem, but we have got things that will combat it, but it's always in the back of your mind. It's nasty, isn't it?
I can't say that all my soldiers are gung-ho and raring to get out there and kill people. That's not what they're like. They're British soldiers, after all.
No certainties anywhere, but there is among the troops on the ground a firm belief that war, if it comes, will go chemical at a very early stage. They're ready for it. Martin Bell, BBC News, in the Saudi desert.
The Ministry of Defence has confirmed that classified documents stolen from an unmarked service car earlier this month were concerned with the Gulf. The theft was reported to the police and the missing papers were returned later the same day.
It was outside this car showroom at Acton in West London that the documents were stolen. The service car had been left unattended, and whoever broke into it also took other items, including a dictaphone and a portable television. The papers were in the care of Wing Commander David Farker. It's understood they'd been used to brief the Prime Minister about the Gulf. The Defence Secretary said he was of course concerned about what had happened, but he didn't think it had undermined British interests in the Gulf.
I take any security breach seriously, and we should at this time. It's our responsibility. And that's why I can't comment because of the police investigation, but nobody should imagine that any security breach at this time isn't taken very seriously indeed.
As I understand it, other materials have not been recovered, and I would therefore hope that the investigation will continue, that we can find out what the character of the materials that have not been recovered are, and what steps the Ministry intend to take to ensure that breaches of security of this nature, based largely on carelessness, don't happen again.
The Ministry of Defence has already begun an inquiry into the incident, and Wing Commander Farker has been transferred to other duties.
There are very clear rules. If you are carrying classified documents, you have to have them on your person. They should be secured in an official briefcase with a key and lock, which I understand they were, but they weren't with the person, and that was the human error.
Although there's been no official word on just how important the documents were, it's understood they were being taken to RAF Strike Command headquarters in Buckinghamshire, and that's where the whole British end of the Gulf operation is being masterminded.
In Northern Ireland, one man has been shot dead and another seriously injured in an incident involving security forces. The shooting happened in the village of Cullyhanna near the border in South Armagh. Police have given no further details. The hijackers of an Algerian plane have surrendered and released all their hostages. 46 passengers and 6 crew members were freed this morning after being held at Annaba Airport in northern Algeria since Friday night. The other 36 passengers were released earlier. The plane was on a domestic flight to Algiers when it was hijacked by 2 Algerians. They are said to be army deserters and have been arrested. 5 young men have been killed in a road accident in mid-Wales. Their car crashed into a wall on the A487 coast road near Cardigan in Dyfed in the early hours of this morning. It's understood that no other vehicles were involved. The 5 victims were all in their late teens or early 20s and came from the Cardigan area. Football, and Crystal Palace have beaten the Barclays First Division leaders Liverpool 1-0 at Selhurst Park. Mark Bright scored the goal which takes Palace to 3rd place behind Arsenal and Liverpool. England's cricketers have lost the 2nd test to Australia in Melbourne by 8 wickets. Australia, who started the final day on 28 for 2, reached their target without losing any more wickets.
With Australia needing only 169 more runs, an early breakthrough was crucial to England's chances of victory. Malcolm's shout for LBW against Boone looked close. The England captain thought so, but Boone survived. At the other end, Geoff Marsh seemed more secure. As Australia's 3rd wicket pair settled in, victory began to look inevitable. And Boone was determined to achieve it in style. Both he and Marsh passed 1,000 runs against England. With the end in sight, Tufnell thought he dismissed Boone, caught behind by Russell.
Caught behind, no he's not.
The bowler's response summed up England's frustration. No England team has ever come from 2 down to win an Ashes series. Gooch's side must now win the 3rd test, starting on Friday, to have any chance of making history.
Small change will be even smaller from tomorrow when shillings and the old 5p coins cease to be legal tender. Banks will take them for several months, but shops and businesses will only accept the new, smaller coin.
The Royal Mint say the smaller, lighter, new 5p piece will save £1 million a year. But it means goodbye to the shilling, which dates back to Saxon times, and its modern partner of the same size, which has been in our pockets and purses since before decimalisation. They disappear with varying degrees of nostalgia and indifference.
I'm not particularly bothered at all. I think the new 5p is quite a nice coin.
I think it would be far best to keep the larger ones.
So you'd like to keep the old bob,
I would definitely, yes. I'd like to keep the old shilling, yes.
It's a sign of the times, isn't it? The 5p is getting worthless, as is the pound and the £5. I'd rather go back to pound, shillings and pence, quite honestly.
Converting the nation's vending machines to the new coin is costing the industry a fortune, which they say they resent.
To us, it's meant that money up to £100 million to save the government money. We think that's terribly unfair. We have asked the government to compensate the trade, the industry, for its cost of converting all these mechanisms, but unfortunately the government has said no.
The machine manufacturers say they'll face a further £34 million in conversion costs when the penny and twopence are changed in the next 2 years.
That's all for now. The main news is at 9:45.